this is maybe an educational game for the youth.
It's very different from the sort of intimate live produced thing that music used to be. If we're trying to revive the Warped Tour, got to get the pool.
I happened into consciousness studies, I guess. It's just like independent things. I just got really into it.
Then the challenge is always like, okay, well, I had this thought that in like real life sounded really good. Vegetarians should feel guilty about eating salt because it's conscious.
I think I'm just trying to understand. Cody, this is our first podcast. Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Tell us something about yourself, maybe something recent that you're doing, or just anything important that...
Sure. I mean, I can just kind of give a background of, how we met and what I'm doing right now. And
Cool.
so, you and I met, we were both working at Amazon, worked together for a couple of years. We're both software engineers when we feel like making money that way, which is not currently what I'm doing. I would call myself a musician right now. So right now, working on some stuff with you. I'm working on some solo stuff, and just getting close to releasing like my inaugural post-rock album. Been working on that pretty hard the last couple of weeks because it's also getting towards time for me to go back to making money at a software engineering job.
Oh.
So as I'm starting to feel the pressure of like, it's time to, do interview prep and start reaching out to recruiters and everything else, then the way my lizard brain works is like, okay, there's that deadline, which means I need to finish the last thing, which was some of this music stuff I was working on. And so now I'm actually being very productive on that again, which is nice.
So deadlines work is what you're saying.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, everything in my mind is like this cascading set of triggers where it's like, people are going to come over today. That means I need to clean the house and do this, that, and the other thing. And like, I've run out of socks. That means it's time to do laundry. And that's just everything I do is sort of an accidental set of triggers that I've set for myself that keeps me in line.
Yeah.
But it mostly works.
A while ago, I decided, the sock game that we play where we'll buy like a pack of 6 pairs of socks or something, and then they'll get mixed in. And I don't know, it's just kind of like you spend your life matching socks.
Sure.
Or not matching socks and being that kind of person.
Yeah.
And so I decided to try the game where you just buy a whole bunch of the same socks all at once. And that was pretty cool. And I think I happened to hit the right volume of socks in my drawer where it is about time for laundry when those are depleted. But there are like different kinds of socks in the back of my drawer that are just in case of emergency. So
yeah, no, I definitely have that too. I've got my like go to, like I made that change like maybe a year or two ago now, but I have like the one set of like Under Armour socks that I buy, and that's like the only ones I buy anymore. But I still have the like got a second drawer somewhere else that's got like fancy dress socks or fun dress socks, and it's got like the okay ones that are left from the old socks I used to have. So it's like in case of emergency.
Yeah.
But yeah, not super. It's nice to not have to have a single sock and be like, there's only one other sock like this in the entire world, and it is missing.
Yeah, which foot am I going to wear this on? It's laundry day.
One flip-flop look.
Yeah, on the music stuff. So yeah, you and I have collaborated.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned here or there that you had some solo stuff. I record some stuff. I have some solo stuff that happens in the background maybe.
Yeah.
But kind of by definition, I never really was involved in the solo stuff.
Sure.
But even more so, like wasn't really exposed to it, so I didn't know how crystallized that was. And so you're making good progress. You're getting somewhere there.
Yeah, I think so. I've got four tracks for the album that I think are basically done. I'm like into the like, okay, I gotta tighten up the mix a little bit and figure out what that means to me, and get the finalized sound. But I've got 4 that are like nearing done, I think, and then I've got one more that I have a demo of that I really like. But the way I do demos is frequently I just have an idea and I'm like, great, pull out the phone, hit the record button on the phone and like play whatever from the guitar right into that. And like that's very good for remembering musical ideas, but that also only can ever sound so good. Because like even as good as like the, not to plug Samsung's phone, not a sponsor, but I don't know. I think the microphone is really good on that. Like I've taken to the practice space and like I could be playing with amplified guitar and drums and like it's still discernible and like it's not something you would publish unless you were like a really muddy garage band just trying to do a quick cut of something. But like I can really flesh out ideas that way and like have the loop pedal going, move to the drums, play that, and still be able to hear all the things that are happening. But so then the challenge is always like, okay, well I had this thought that in like real life sounded really good. On the phone, like I can still feel the magic of it, but then how do I like go back to the computer, like get out the guitar, hit record, and like capture that sound in a way that like actually it sounds all the way good instead of just like the intersection of what's recorded on my phone and what I remember in my head sounding good. And those are kind of two separate things. And I think that's something I'm still learning how to tackle,
There's a lot that goes into producing. Like working with you, we've found out. We've started to, like I've certainly dabbled in the past, and you've certainly dabbled in the past. So it was like I had this personal like endeavor. Like I want to make it in and out like 100%, like polished and thorough, and I wanted the songs to make sense next to each other. I wanted the album to make sense with itself, and all that stuff. And it can be, I mean, it's a fractal. So, you mentioned you're talking about the recording in your practice space. What kind of practice space is that?
Yeah, so I rent a space at Crybaby Studios down in a kind of Capitol area, and it's a super punk rock basement, basically.
Okay.
You go down the stairs. There's like the smoking corner around the corner, and you go past the like super janky bathroom, and then there's my practice space. Which when we started renting it, like 8 years ago now,
wow,
there was still like a bunch of permanent marker art all over the wall from the previous people, and like their attempts at soundproofing had been to put up some random carpet all over the walls, which by the time we moved in was like super full of mildew and must and everything. And so my buddy was like dying of allergies down there. And so we tore that all down and like did a bunch of stuff. And like over time, as we've like my friend Thomas, who also is in a band, Calm Down Party, who play in shows around Seattle, super fun. But like he really did a number on the space, making it look super cool. Like now it like looks like there's a tree growing out of the corner, and he's got like a projector screen in there and like some soundproofing stuff on the walls. So like it's not somewhere you could go and like really record stuff professionally, probably. Not the least of the reason because the rooms aren't like soundproof at all. So like if somebody's in the space next to you, you hear every single thing they're doing, which is complicated. And then if you were trying to mic something, you would just have to wait until they were gone. And there's enough spaces that it's basically never completely quiet in your space. But it's a great place to go and just like make loud noises because you can't really do that in an apartment in downtown Seattle. It's
important for a musician.
Yeah.
We'll get back to that actually.
Sure.
So when you were like so it sounds like you have an ideation process is what I would call that.
Sure.
Where you'll go and you'll generate ideas and you'll try to capture them like off the cuff, and so you can come back to them later and proceed in an organized fashion. So you're like recording that on your phone, and you were saying like it was maybe a little bit muddy, but it wasn't. It was great as far as your expectations. So are you recording that like? So you're in this little, what do you like an 8x8 foot room?
No, it's larger than that. It's probably 12 to 14 feet across and 16 to 20 feet long.
I guess it feels smaller once you start filling it with stuff.
Oh yeah, no. When you've got amps and a drum set and the piano and everything, then it gets tight and you're like penguin walking around.
So but it's more like a basement room, kind of thing. And then are you recording that amplified then?
Yeah.
Oh, that's impressive. Yeah.
I don't know if there's podcast is necessarily the right way to pull out my phone and be like, here's you, me, and Ari playing together. But I do have that all like recorded.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
like there was certainly at least one jam when we were doing that stuff together. Like that was, we all kind of clicked on. And so it's cool to be able to just like, we could pull that up and iterate on that if we wanted.
Okay. Actually, you're reminding me of a game that I've prepared.
Okay. I like
Now,
games.
I think this is maybe an educational game for the youth or the or just those without studios in their mansions, I guess. So I was thinking, that's a big thing. Like, I was always so reserved with my music. Playing piano was a little bit different of a thing. That's where I started. We had an acoustic piano when I was growing up, and I could play that for the family and stuff like that. But when it started to get really personal for me was when I started to sing.
Yeah.
And
It's soul bearing.
like even without the singing part, like I didn't like to talk out loud to people. So it was like it took a long time for me to find like a piece of my voice, or let alone to find my voice kind of thing. So fortunately, like when I was young, I did, my family let me, like, actually I remember my grandma helping me move around the kitchen, like move the refrigerator out of the way so we could push this stand-up grand piano, her and I, through the kitchen and into my bedroom. And then I got to have that in my bedroom and feel a little bit more secure while I started to learn how to sing. I started with Jamie Cullum. He's kind of like a British, he started out, playing piano and doing like jazz covers and stuff like that. And he was pretty young at the time when I think I was in high school at that time. But you go from there. When I was in college, I had a house that, it was more like a somewhat rural town, and so there was more space between the houses, and it was a good place to practice, but I still kind of felt a little like, am I allowed to do this? And then from there it was like apartment, and where I actually had two different people in the, like, my downstairs neighbors complained, and then when they moved out and were replaced, the same unit, different people complained about it again, and it was just like, whew. So it's a big deal. I never really would shell out the cash for a practice space. It's getting appetizing though. But here are a few places that people may or may not want to consider practicing music in. And so what is the game here exactly? Maybe we can have you, maybe we'll do a head-to-head. I have 10 different spaces, and then the loser can leave the stack, and then maybe at the end we'll perhaps find Cody's dream space.
Okay.
Of the reject spaces.
Sure.
Okay, so the first one should be familiar to you. We have a basement.
Yeah.
Where a lot of us start, at least if we're above the water table.
Yeah. Yeah.
And have you ever
share of basement music?
played music in a storage unit?
Have I played music in a storage unit? Nope.
No.
Is there usually electrical in a storage unit?
You can get electrical.
Okay.
But they're different. Yeah, they're priced differently.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I've never done that. And I guess if the question is between a basement and a storage outlet, is that like, or? I
mean, yeah, we can talk about them if there's something to say. If not, we can blaze through them. But the basics of what we're doing here is, which one do you think you'd rather, like if you were to commit to a year or something and practice your music here or there?
Yeah, so I think the main trade-offs for me, I think the basement is going to be more like comfortable temperature-wise and stuff, but I think it's also likely that there's a lot more like noise issues with a basement, both because like if you've got neighbors or whatever above you, that could be a thing, whereas a storage unit is probably not a populated place. But also frequently in a basement, you've got your, heater, you've got your washer, dryer, or whatever. And sometimes the lighting, you got like fluorescent lights and they do that hum or something. Like, I think there's a bunch of reasons that's maybe slightly less appetizing. But I think if I was choosing between the two, I'd choose the basement.
Okay.
Because the convenience factor, I think, is a huge deal.
Snacks.
I love snacks. Toilet too, yeah. But like, I think just having a space near to you is a major pro. Because like I have that practice space, but I don't frequently go much more than like once a week.
Yeah.
And it's because it is like a 15 to 20 minute walk away. And so if my choice is I can reach over to the side of my couch, grab a guitar and make some noise versus commit to walking 20 minutes to be able to make, maybe louder noise or whatever else, but like it is a trade-off, and it's usually easier to have something closer. It's kind of like having do I want a gym that's close to me or like a nice gym far away? Like frequently the one that's like right there, you're going to actually go to.
That's consistency is key there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So basement.
Yeah.
Cool. This one's kind of similar, and part of this, I don't know if we'll have much more to say with each one. So part of it's just like the to explore the options again for anyone who might be interested in getting creative with their space. So this one is interesting. I went down to the docks one time with my friend, and he took us inside of a shipping container, and he was like, "Check out the sound in here. It's pretty gnarly."
Just because there's like a bunch of weird natural reverb stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
yeah, I mean, just you could tour the country in that.
Tour the country. Yeah.
Ship your entire band to each location on the way.
Wow, man, that's a great point. It's like the practice space. I mean, you could certainly dress it up. So right here, this is a picture. This is your right off the docks kind of shipping container. I've seen people make houses out of these and stuff like that.
For sure.
Get cozy in there. So add some sound treatment, maybe some plywood and carpet tiles or something, depending. That's starting to be a whole thing.
Yeah,
but
I think I would still choose basement of these. But I think you could. Do you have any idea what a shipping container costs?
Did it fall off the boat?
International maritime salvage laws. We're getting into those. Like, finders keepers, baby.
Yeah, I have no idea.
The barnacles off.
I have heard. I was visiting my wife's grandpa, and he was talking about they found this tractor off the side of the road, kind of thing, and it had been there forever and ever and ever. And there's like these kind of laws, or this was in North Dakota, maybe, or I don't know. He has the capability to haul a tractor, so maybe it was in a different state entirely. But there's kind of like I forget what they're called, but it's like a common. It's like a statute of limitations kind of. It's like this has not been activated in so long, and so anyone can claim it. Sure. And so he did claim it, and then like fix it up and kind of stuff. So I don't know. I have no idea what it costs to purchase a shipping container. There might be other ways of acquiring one.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think also I would need land to put it on and stuff. So it's not a particularly good option for me. But if we're a hypothetical where I just own like a couple acres, and it's like somebody would drop a shipping container there, or I can do it in the basement.
Exactly. Cool.
But yeah, I still think I'll stick to the basement.
Yeah. This one's kind of, we're still going on a similar theme, but this one's kind of fun. Now the pictures for this were usually too much. So this is a fairly put together version. This is an abandoned warehouse.
See, that could be pretty cool, because that can also be like a venue, right?
Yeah.
Like it's having put on a rock show in my parents' house before, there's only so much space you actually have in a house situation, whereas a warehouse, you could easily fit like, 50, 100 people and have a whole thing. The acoustics are probably still going to be questionable, but it doesn't matter. You're like an up and coming band. Like, if you came into a warehouse, that'd be sick. I would absolutely choose the warehouse. That seems cool. That's
so cool. There's like, you can put down like big area rugs. I've actually been at a warehouse show in St. Louis, and I think it was called The Cave. It was off the Mississippi River, and they had big area rugs. There's a bunch of like art installations. People would make stuff out of tape and just creative people.
That's super cool.
And there's like fold out tables where they'd set up and you could come in and they'd, like guide you down the entryway, and then people could set up their merch, and everyone liked to stamp vinyls of their things. And it was like pretty, like
that's rad. Yeah.
That kind of scene. So it was really cool.
Yeah. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Warehouse.
Yeah.
I agree. We're gonna goodbye basement. Hello warehouse.
Heck yeah. We're moving up in the world.
Yeah, this one's staged actually because I was reminded this was named a cave, but here we have an actual cave.
All right.
Different scene.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, I don't know, some of the sounds you get in a cave are going to be pretty cool. And I think depending on what you're doing, you might find some natural inspiration and like patterns of stalactites and stalagmites or whatever else. Or just like, playing in, like, a warehouse is kind of a big square, a rectangle. And so like there's just only so many like options for how things are going to sound. And you got like a much more complex like area in a cave. So like depending on where you are, the sound might be completely different. And I think that would be cool for just like inspiring different feels. Cause like, I don't know, I find a lot of the time when I like am holding a different instrument or playing with a different tone on my guitar or whatever, like that kind of changes the kind of things that sound good. And then, that does make sense. And so like, it's like, ooh, I kind of like how this thing sounds in general. And you find from there, like, okay, but wait, now this is the thing that sounds good with that. And then you like kind of generate stuff that way. And so the cave could like inspire stuff that way, maybe. But I still think if I'm choosing between the two, I would go with the warehouse because of the A, electrical, B, just like utility of like a more accessible space to be able to do like hosting of shows and stuff would be fun.
The cave is kind of like a destination wedding, or it sounded like when the Beatles went to India, and then they came back with a new sound kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But it'd be cool.
It's pretty cool.
Mess around with.
Yeah. All right. Next one. Treehouse.
Ooh. Yeah. I mean, this is going to be kind of, again, a fun place to retreat to and like make music with. I don't know. This looks like almost like a cozy, like tiny home out in the middle of the woods.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's got the convenience factor of like, presumably that's going to be, I don't know. I guess I'm assuming based on this picture, it looks like a place where I would be living while I'm doing it. And that's like tapping into the convenience factor.
Yeah.
Also the tree houses I've known as a, child and whatever else was like in the backyard and places. So I think you've got the convenience aspect and then like being out in nature, I think just kind of relaxing and, depending on what you're doing, it might be inspiring in that way. I don't know. Like, I feel like in terms of like a location to go to have a different sound, like the cave was more exciting than the treehouse. I think, I don't know, the kind of vibe that the treehouse gives me kind of gives me like a similar vibe to like when I just go out on my like little porch balcony thing and like the sun is like kind of coming down and it's like you're in like nice warm outdoors and you like got the courtyard in front of you and you're like playing the acoustic guitar and like that's
good for folk music, etc.
And just like it is a super cool feel. I still don't know if it's enough to convince me that it's a superior thing to the warehouse in terms of total value.
The warehouse,
to me.
I mean, we're just at the phase of life where warehouse is probably going to be the choice.
Yeah, there's also it's space. I could like dump all this shit that I have
offload some of it.
Yeah, it could just be like a little roped off area of the warehouse. It's like, do not touch. This is mine.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of utility.
Yeah, I think it would have been interesting, especially as a kid, I think a lot of times I wanted to get out of the house, but I didn't really have, I don't know, the autonomy. I don't know. I feel like if I went to a warehouse, even if it had existed, that would have been a little too hardcore for me to go out and do.
Sure.
So a tree house is an interesting one. And
yeah, it's a good private space, right? It's like there's not going to be a bunch of people hanging around you and stuff. You can kind of you have that bit of isolation to experiment and not be judged than by yourself.
Do you know if sound travels preferentially travels up compared to down more? Like if you're above people, are they going to catch more of your practice waves? I know amphitheaters work from the bottom up, but that might be a visual relaxation of your neck kind of thing.
I'm trying to think. So I think air density is higher the closer you are to the surface of the earth. So
maybe
there is probably a little bit of science in that sound travels down slightly better than up. But I think the flip side of that is it's also going to hit a surface and reflect, and that's going to cause interference. Whereas something traveling up is probably not going to hit anything until it reaches the point that it's being observed from. Well, but I mean, I don't know. That seems pretty hypothetical.
The branches will help.
Yeah, I don't know.
And the little squirrels, they're full of fuzz. They're like little wind screens.
Have you spent much time out in the woods, doing hunting or anything like that, or just been out observing nature for long periods of time?
I mean, okay,
not
I don't know,
to
depends on the
divert
question.
Not to divert the entire conversation from this, but my dad was big into hunting growing up, and so I did a fair amount of bow hunting and stuff for deer. And what that is you're out in the backwoods and you're in a tree stand and you're trying to sit as still as possible and observe the world and wait and hope that something walks by that you're looking to harvest. But you're trying to be calm, you're trying to be still, and then you start hearing the going through the it's the fall, there's leaves all over the ground, and you would be alarmed how loud a single squirrel in the woods can be. Turns out you're getting all amped up, you're like, oh my god, am I gonna have to do the thing now? And the first couple times you hear the squirrel, you're like, it's go time, and then 10 minutes later it's there's one little squirrel just bounding through the leaves and looking for nuts. It turns out you actually have to, it's not the leaves you have to listen for, it's you can hear the weight of the footfall of the deer is a lot of how you can distinguish the two, because a squirrel weighs this much and a deer weighs us much.
Would you call that the transient?
Probably.
So now I think when not too deep into sound
Sure.
Audio production, but I think I heard I think that's called at the inception of a sound, when you hit a cymbal, for instance, you'll have a big spike, and that's the transient, and then you have the afterwards. I forget what that's called.
The transient's the biggest peak of the waveform, right? Is that true or not? I don't know. I feel when I'm picturing a cymbal crash, there's the little baby cone on the front, and it spikes up, and then it tails back into the middle. And I thought the transient was that.
It might be that
impact
point in time. I guess I assumed that it was the first a range of time from the very beginning to that spike.
Interesting.
But we can look that up.
I don't know this answer. You probably know better than I.
Transient.
I feel I've been starting to delve into how do I make music stuff sound good when I'm recording it, and so then people are talking about you got to line the transients up with the beat and whatever else. Which I've had successes and failures with, and I'm happy to expound on that, or we can save that for later. Up to you.
Transient reminds me of the word sibilance.
I'm not familiar.
Sibilance. When you DS a sound, the S is a sibilant.
Yes.
So that was Treehouse versus Warehouse.
Yeah, I think I'm still Warehouse.
Done with the warehouse or with the houses. Church.
Ooh. See, I think
This is a kind of nicer church too.
Oh yeah.
It's not just like another type of box.
Yeah, but no, I think having played in a praise band for a while in my younger years, I think I would choose the church over the warehouse in a heartbeat. I mean, obviously, you might, depending on whether or not you care about distancing yourself from the religious context or not. But I think churches are frequently, beautiful, well-made buildings, and because so much of what happens in a church revolves around delivery of sound, they tend to be acoustically nice. And so like the church I grew up in, it's both the pastor, preacher, reverend, whatever is like, you want that person to be able to be heard. And before everything was mic'd up, like it's important that the acoustics, enable that. And even once things are mic'd up, you still are paying attention to that. But then the other part of it too is like singing and music and, piano and organ and stuff. And so there's just an awesome natural reverb to a space that big that just, it feels cool. And when you're like in there by yourself making music, like it sounds good. Whereas the warehouse, I just expect it's not going to necessarily sound good. It's just big and kind of like rattly. And like a church is just going to be like, ideally it's going to be like, ooh. And yeah, I think you've got the comment, then you can also get back to that sort of a venue type thing, which is nice.
It's got that.
So it's got, pretty much only upsides from the warehouse.
Sometimes they have like kitchens built in too. And,
oh yeah.
I mean, there's no upper limit to a church. And what did you say?
Oh, and basements.
And basement. Oh, they have basements and tree houses and storage containers.
Yeah, but I mean, there's probably an organ or a piano or both. Sound system.
Oh yeah, it's not like they move those when they leave. Is that what you're saying? Like,
you can't take a pipe. The pipe organ doesn't really move so well.
That was one of the I don't recall the story extremely well, but yeah, like I heard about the construction of like these cathedrals in Europe and stuff. Yeah. And they would take more than anyone's lifetime to build, and then they would like.
Well, it's because it was like 16 years lifespan,
right? Whoa! Shots fired. And then like the pipe organs, for instance, they would have to be built inside because they would take up, so much space. And then also like you would have like pipe organ experts that would just listen. They would like strike the pipe and then they'd be like, and they listen to the space and like tune it. And I don't know. It was just like this whole thing and just like there is so like much. I was actually really surprised to hear how much of like an epicenter of the arts, churches and cathedrals were. And I mean, it makes sense because, like stained glass windows, arrange it according to the light with a particular, so you get a particular effect. And then the tiles and the, like the columns that I've heard that they mimic like a forest, and the acoustics can mimic a canopied forest and stuff like that. Sure. And then the music, and it's all like creating a cathartic experience that's to bring you closer to my,
Yeah. That's super cool.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of interesting to think about how music in our society works now versus how it worked, 50 years ago versus 100 years ago versus whatever, right? Like recorded music has completely changed things. 100 years ago, well, I mean, they were doing recordings of music and stuff then. So if we go 200 years ago, then it was probably mostly just a person or a band performing music. And that was when you heard music, or like when you went to church and everybody sang together. That was your like musical outlet. And now I'm on the bus here. I got my headphones on, and there's like 4 different people like listening to music without headphones through their phone. And that's like, music is just like everywhere now.
Yeah.
And it's
interesting.
It's very different from the sort of intimate live produced thing that music used to be. And I think it's interesting how often I don't know. I'm just thinking about the experience of listening to music in a church or a place that's like specifically for music versus the experience of like listening to it on your headphones versus the experience of like going to a venue that's like for live music, but like that's the type of live music you hear at like Numos is very different from the live music experience in a church, right? Even in today's age.
Yeah. I heard a number of things in that. One of them was, I think modern society gets kind of freaked out at how much alignment that the church perhaps was able to achieve across a number of humans, like
Sure.
like maybe it's more associated with like control, or sometimes people say like brainwashing, or some there's more conspiratorial kind of things I don't know, out there, and that's not the only thing out there either.
No, for sure.
But at the same time, it's also when you're talking about like we have all these different people, let's say on a bus, and they're all plugged into their own music. There's like this trajectory toward just novelty and
Yes.
kind of thing. And so it's interesting, like people are finding it's almost, I think like taking us back to like that church kind of culture with the music, and let's dial it back a couple hundred years ago.
Sure.
I think it was bringing people in resonance with each other and the thing, right? Yeah. And then so now it's kind of more like every individual has a mirror, and they're getting in a feedback cycle, like resonance with themselves, or
Yes.
maybe their soul, or however you might want to interpret that. But that is a very interesting turn of events.
Yeah, and I think it is, as fewer people are committed to church or church-like entities, I think it is, you're losing that sense of that like community and communal focus of groups. It is everybody on the bus is plugged into their own thing rather than like working together, and like you don't necessarily have that same outlet to go to a place where everybody is like into the same thing. You kind of have to find your own way there, and I think that's I think it's something our society is still trying to figure out, is like how do we maybe reestablish that community center idea without it necessarily having to be around one specific thing.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. We're going to continue with the game, but I will like leave a little branch for maybe a future one where so we have like the church that was kind of that unifying thought around a particular value set or something. And then I think we kind of moved towards like broadcast television. So we had like democracy and stuff, but we still had like a representational like style government thing. And people started having like more of their own individual voice, but they were getting the same kind of information, the same source of information for the most part. So whatever individuality came out of that was maybe less volatile, I might say. And so it is really interesting that now we'll have like you and I can get together and do a podcast and can go and project that out, and people, I don't know, it's where do we find a way to keep things together, without it just being chaos.
Sure.
Let's replace warehouse. You did really well. Okay. Here's an idea. This is a little bit of a sophisticated version of this, maybe, because I went ahead and just found this is a bus that has been converted. Not set up for music right now, but
sure, but it could be. And like, I don't know. I think there's like that's super enticing if you're like in a position where you're like, wait, I could tour my music with this, or like I could go different places for, meeting people and collaborating that way and have everything right there. I think that part of it's super exciting. And I think, I don't know, have you spent much time? Well, yeah, you lived in a van. So like, that's kind of a similar experience.
Yeah.
Like, can you maybe pitch me on did you do much music stuff while you were vamping? Van lifing?
Let's see. Yeah, I had to.
Vanity? I don't know. What's the best term?
Van life, it's more, that's not like a verb, but
Sure.
but yeah, that's a hashtag that was applied to some Instagram posts. So I can vouch for that one.
I see it on dating profiles all the time.
Vamping, that's an interesting one, because that does remind me of, like getting, someone hop on the electric piano and vamp. So I appreciate that, but I don't know if I'm ready to let that go and overload it like that. But yeah, I was on like two different like legs of a journey, in two different vans that were converted, and one I had more say in the conversion, and I purchased the van and did that whole thing. We had a high top van. It was like a full size Dodge Ram van, like 3,500. I don't remember the number, but and it was actually like the kind that a conversion company had done in the past, but it's more like the theater seats, and then there was an old style television in it, that kind of thing, like really kind of luxury way to go on vacation with your family kind of thing. But anyway, yeah, still gutted that out, and then used like an old legal like lawyer desk, one of those big solid wood ones, and turn that into a bed, and was, had to live out of it at the end of the day. And so it was like me, my wife, my dog, and my cat. And so, like litter box and everything. It was that was the second leg of the journey. And that was, I wasn't prepared for that life, I guess. Like, I think there are stories I could tell about that. But to stay on the theme of music, I don't think there was much music going on then. It was just, something like this. Well, I think the point with that is like, it was geared towards the living. Now, what was interesting about it is, I don't know, you're in a van, it's got high clearance, you could put some mud tires on it, you could really get some access to some places, and you could get going anywhere you want.
Sure.
And that's a big benefit. I mean, I spoke earlier about the treehouse, just kind of get away from whoever, maybe it was, because a lot of times when I'm playing music, I want to get out of the daily headspace and just go out there into the stratosphere kind of thing. And so, like you might be able to do that in an isolation tank, but I'd probably ruin your instrument. So that isolation tank isn't a recommended one in this game. So,
yet, until we got the waterproof guitar.
Yeah. Oh, I just thought of like the International Space Station, but anyway, like, yeah, it was cool. Like, I like the fact that I could go and maybe spend a few days somewhere, like sleep in the van kind of thing, and really just, maybe I think with the treehouse, like for instance, we did say, yeah, that tended to give you a little bit, like the cave gave you more of an atmospheric kind of thing, and the treehouse gave you maybe more of a folk kind of thing, let's say. And I think the scenery really, really changes. Like there's a rhythm just, I noticed that moving from Missouri to Washington, I guess primarily Washington like doesn't have that many insects, or like loud ones.
Yeah.
But Missouri had a lot of activity going on in the bushes, and it was a whole different rhythm. And you can get different beats out of it and different music, coming out of it. So this is a pretty good option. I think that vehicles are a lot more accessible than a church, especially starting out. You can probably get your hands on something, and it's definitely a cool way to go.
Yeah, I think I have two things based off the points you were just making. I think one, when I think about music and like I go to shows and like there's a big bunch of like, I see the people on stage and I like imagine myself being up there and like playing, like, I've done some live shows and stuff and it's super fun. And so I like, would I want to, would I be able to do the touring life and stuff? And like, there's one part of me like that would be a super cool experience. And there's the other part of me where it's like, I think about living in a 15 passenger van basically for 4.5 months. And I'm like, ooh,
yeah,
I might be too much of a baby to do that. I'm like a picky sleeper. I like to shower. Like,
yeah.
So that's always one of those things where it's like, I don't know if I could do the like tour the country in a 15 passenger van thing. I don't know. I've never tried it. I'm sure I could, but I don't know if that would be like something I'd be super excited to do.
Yeah. I will say, I know we were just making a case for the fact that this thing has wheels. And this is kind of like, anyway, so I was recently, I spent some time in South Dakota. Did I say North Dakota earlier? One of the Dakotas, this summer at the grandparents', and they had, like a kind of a smaller RV, bigger than a van, but it's an RV. It had like 2 twin beds in it.
Yeah.
And that was like parked in a garage. So I could have used the garage for music, but I would go, it was great. I got to go into the garage and then into the RV, and it just like kept me nice and focused. I felt isolated enough to make some noise. And it had electricity, and it had, like a table. It was modular and stuff like that. And that was a really good experience.
Yeah. Music making is like a pretty intimate process. And I think like the being able to go away to make music is nice, if only because like, I don't know, I frequently feel like anxious and self-conscious around making it sometimes, because how a lot of my creative process is make a lot of noise until I find stuff I like. Mm-hmm. But like at the same time, I have a lot of like social anxieties or anything else of like, I want to be good at music. And so like that clash of like, if I make bad noises and it's by myself and nobody ever hears them, that's great. But it's when I'm like, okay, now it's time to go to jam with people. And it's like, how do I make good noises on demand? That's like terrifying. Yeah. And so I think that's like a big part of playing with people too, is like, how do you find people that you're comfortable making the bad noises with so that you can find the good noises together? And, I'm sure there's education and different things I could do to shorten my process to the good noises. Mm-hmm. But I think in general, I think talking about the isolation and stuff is interesting, but I think it's like kind of a separate axis for me from the like, is this somewhere I want to play music? And I don't know. It's interesting to kind of think about. But then to bring that back to these two options, I think I think this converted bus is super tempting, and I think it would be fun. But gun to my head, I'm gonna pick the church because I think the acoustic properties of the church is more exciting to me than the mobility and potential isolation or like travel options of the bus.
With the making noises thing, it's so like I've started discovering this type of thing in multiple places in life, and it's basically like your relationship with failure, and the vulnerability of failure and stuff like that. And so when you're surrounded, especially like you can solve that problem. Well, first of all, letting failure defeat you altogether, I mean, that goes nowhere pretty fast. So I think people have the intuition that they need to do something about that. And I think the like seclusion is definitely a way to try to solve that problem. But there's something about that where like, I think that's how I try to solve the problem, but there's something about that was so, like I never I never felt like I was never completely open, and I almost felt like a traitor to myself or something. Like there was something, like I was carrying some disappointment in myself for never actually just letting everything go and just making the noise and being actual like channel for expression to flow through, and who knows where it comes from, and it just comes, and that's when everyone's like, you know, people know when they feel it, when they witness that.
Yeah.
And everyone's happy about that, you know, like that's a great experience for everyone, and that's good for, you know, like maybe whatever, maybe you have a different goal, it's not music, or, you know, I went through it with software engineering and stuff like that, and that helped me start to develop, my team has helped me start to develop a better relationship with failure, and that's really, you know, helped me like cross train and maybe made me a better musician for it.
Sure.
But I think I wanted to say that to lead me into an experience that I had maybe in my early 20s, and when I was living in St. Louis, there was this place called the Limp Center for the Arts, and it was like, I think the Limp family was a wealthy family in St. Louis, and there's this mansion that they had that you can go and eat dinner at and do like haunted mansion tours and stuff, and mystery dinners, and but then I'm imagining that this was another building that they had originally owned. But anyway, I don't exactly know the history here, but I went there to the Limp Center of the Arts to see a show, and it was kind of like I think there was maybe like a middle-aged man who owned the place, but what he did was, it was kind of a place where you would get like salvaged couches and you know, just thrifted items or free things from Craigslist, and they would be aggregated in this space. So he just made the space, and he opened it up for primarily, if not exclusively, the youth of St. Louis, and then they would go and they would be able to practice there. And, you know, there was, you know, big speakers, and there was some equipment there. Mostly you would bring your own like instruments and stuff, but touring bands would come, and it gave people the ability to like self-organize and like put together a show, and that meant like creating the list of bands. And like there was 2 people that I knew who were radio hosts for the local music station, and so they were in communication with bands coming in from out of town, and so sometimes they'd pitch in with this kind of thing. It was a cool thing.
That sounds rad.
And I think like you know, sometimes we think about, what do you want to do here with your time? Like,
Sure.
What mark do you want to leave, or whatever? Maybe it's an experience, maybe it's a lasting thing. That sounds very interesting to me. Like, because I think we got here from, where can I go and make random noises until they're good, and in the presence of others, and then you're united around a cause.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that would just be amazing to help facilitate something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Like the closest thing I've been to that, you know, somewhat recently was when I was playing with my buddy Andrew, now Giuzan. But we played at this thing called Chelan Fest, and like the first one was just like a bunch of friends who like all liked making music, and they kind of got a bunch of acts together, and we went out in the middle of the desert, and they had like, you know, put up like a semi bed as a stage and had a generator down the hill, and like everybody played like a 30-minute set, and it was like, you know, that was kind of, we wanted everything to be original and just like, you know, come share your music with a bunch of friends. And that was like super cool. It was low pressure. It was like, I don't know. It was like, it's different from what you're describing, but sort of similar in a way where it was just like, yeah, let's just like get something out there. And then like some of those bands have continued on and like started to do cool stuff. Not that they continued to do cool stuff.
Right. Yeah. That's actually, yeah, I think a lot of time, I've spent a lot of time like seeing successful musicians, or however the game is more traditionally played, and it's strange that I've let myself be led so astray, as that, you know, like that's kind of more of a corporate thing. Like what are we talking about here? Like, I've forgotten about the whole go and get random items out of your closet and make a piece of artwork kind of, you know. It's like that's creativity. I think I was just listening to another podcast with, it was like Lex Friedman and Yosha Bach, and Yosha was describing his time. He grew up during communism in Germany, and there was like a really like, they didn't have money to go out and eat, for instance. And he was like, well, him and his friends got the idea, let's cook food, but let's make it a restaurant for all of our friends. And so they would take turns, you know, like hosting the restaurant kind of thing. They would put on their own restaurant. And then eventually it started attracting more people, and they started like building it up to a bigger thing, and then leaving infrastructure behind. And so it's so interesting. Like, you know, you've heard of like the Great Restoration periods after the Civil War and stuff like that. And I guess I've never actually heard any of the bite size, like the implementation of what that looks like. Like, I guess I imagine it was, you know, like a president signing a treaty or signing a document, like, go and build the stuff. And then people would go and build the stuff. But no, it's more just like, it's an expression of, we want the world to be something beautiful. And
yeah. Along those lines, if you've ever been to Volunteer Park, kind of in the north part of Capitol Hill, beautiful park, and it's it's done by the same guy who did Central Park in New York City, like the Olmsted brothers, and so, but like there's this big water tower there, and you can just like walk up, and there's a whole exhibit about all that. But it's like, you know, now I'm drawing a blank on the time period. It must have been. Oh boy, I'm bad at dates and history and stuff. Yeah. But, you know, they just got a bunch of grants. So like, let's make beautiful things in the city. And so they made a bunch of parks around Seattle, and one of them was Volunteer Park. And it's just like cool to see that kind of investment. And like, here's a cool space that's going to be not just stores and buildings and whatever, but like a good place for people to go and hang out. And, yeah.
Cool. Whew.
Church.
We spent a lot of time on that one. That was a good one. So you spent some time in the desert for Chilean Fest. This is a pool in the middle of the desert, but the point is the pool.
Man, I just look at this and I think Tony Hawk.
Yeah, it's hard. I was looking for pictures of empty swimming pool, and they were all filled with skateboarders.
Yep. If we're trying to revive the Warp Tour, got to get the pool. Boy, past that, it's
a place you could play music if you had nowhere else to go.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I have a bunch of questions about this, and it's mostly, why can't I skateboard? I wanted to skateboard so badly as a kid, and I could never learn how to do an ollie.
Why?
I can ride a skateboard, and that's about as far as my talent goes.
I see. Why are you physically incapable of skateboarding?
Probably because I'm terrified of crashing.
That's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think in terms of like, what does an empty pool bring to making music, aside from like wanting to channel my, you know, early Blink-182 days or something. I don't know that it has a lot for me.
Yeah.
Especially as a non-capable skater.
Yeah. Music videos, some interesting sounds, and then it's kind of like the sugar candy of, and then have a little. This is our final one. I think this is just kind of neat. We've got a houseboat.
That would be cool. I mean, you know, you got the pretty much all the perks of the treehouse, except it's more mobile.
Yeah. And the van in a way.
In a way, yeah. But like, yeah, no, you're doing it. I was literally going to say, like, there is like the natural motion of the movement of the water that like could inspire some stuff. Yeah. And I think that's certainly cool. And like, I have, you know, I definitely have been out on a boat and like played acoustic guitar and stuff, and it is super nice. It's just relaxing, and I don't know. It's got some of that isolation quality. It's got some of the nature quality.
You've been on a boat like that?
I've never been on a houseboat.
Okay.
I have been on sailboats and like fishing boats, and
like one with like a cabin that. Well, when you were on the boat, were you out in the open air, or did it have like a?
The music times it was open air. I've been on like closed cabin boats too. But yeah, most of my boating experience has been on my dad's like Lund 18-foot outboard motor boat. And it was for fishing on Lake Erie was its primary purpose until I was, my dad stopped doing his fishing business at some point when I was young, and then it was mostly just it was at the lake for when we were doing fishing or water sports like wakeboarding and inner tubing and stuff.
Oh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Didn't grow up on a lake that, you get a lot more recreate. Like the Mississippi River was a big chugging brown river at the point where I intersected with it. And it was kind of like, I guess you could go down there and go to the casino. So you chose church.
Yeah, I think I ultimately have landed on church for the utility of the sound and the potential venue.
Heck yeah. Would you be interested in so now sometimes I like to do the design inside of it. Like I would be interested in seeing how you would decorate the church, like crushed purple velvet walls and stuff.
Oh man, how I would decorate the church. I mean, I think it would be cool to have for one, the stained glass windows, you could do some really cool art mosaic stuff with things that I like. So having a stained glass album cover of some album I really liked could be really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Maybe a little on the nose, but I really like God as an Astronaut self-titled album. So having that as a stained glass window would be pretty cool and interesting at a church. Yeah. And also just characters and video game things I like, or movie things, other pop culture stuff, or now I'm imagining a board game cover as a stained glass window could be kind of fun too. I don't know. I think that would be the most fun thing to start with, and then I think past that, what would I want decorating the area to inspire me and whatever else, or just make it a cool place to be around? And I don't know. I'm maybe not the most
aesthetic.
Yeah, or just if a place is for a purpose, it doesn't maybe the aesthetic doesn't affect me as much. I definitely enjoy going to cool places and seeing what people do with their spaces and stuff. And at the same time, if you go into my bedroom, I have no art hanging up or anything, because what I do in my bedroom is go to sleep and wake up and get dressed and leave. It's kind of it. So it's I don't need it to be I spend most of the time in there with the lights off. I don't need to have art in there necessarily. But then I do feel weird when it's I show people around my house and I'm this is my bedroom. There is a bed. There are shelves and dressers. It's a room.
Bedroom. Yeah. I mean that's, I can see that being a pretty practical place of the house. Sure, I will say I've seen you have, your light bulbs this will be a white one and this will be a warm one, and you were it doesn't affect me, and, and it was blowing my mind. I was but how am I supposed to make music?
Yeah, I don't know. I prefer whiter light than most people, just in general, and so the warm lights are almost a compromise some of the time, I think, but it's there is a niceness of the mellowness of a warm light, but I also, if it's too far shifted towards red, then things that I know what they look like in the sun, and when they look not like that, then I'm but it's wrong.
Yeah.
And so I have that trouble with I know that probably it would be in my best interest to have my computer and my phone and everything else do there's that program Flux, or there's similar utilities, like my Samsung phone has a thing where it'll just like, at midnight it'll just go into red shift mode or blue light filter or whatever it is, and that would probably be better for sleeping and everything else, but it drives me a little insane because it's like this is supposed to be white, but now it looks like peach to me, and that's wrong, and then it like tickles my brain weird. But I have the same problem, like there's stuff like that does affect me, because it's like I'm very particular about like putting the left earbud in my left ear and my right earbud in my right ear, even when they're like a symmetrical design.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, I know how this piece of music sounds, and like there's stuff over here and stuff over here, and when it's coming out of the wrong sides, it feels wrong, and I don't know. So,
wow. So I started hearing a bunch of things where these things do affect you. So maybe it was just a very specific thing that I was like the white and the orange light, the mixture, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I was reducing the problem set there. It was like, maybe it was like the position of the light was more affecting me, or it's like something like I like to have lamps more in the like a lot more diffused light, and there's a lot of peculiarities that I have around light, and
sure.
But
I just have a different problem set, or like a different priority set of what is important to me. Like, I feel like definitely if in my experience around you, it seems like you want a more mellow atmosphere in general. Like it's
in general,
more like warmer lights, not feng shui, but just like a more organized approach to things.
You could call it feng shui.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Yeah, but I don't know. I just like there's places where I prioritize stuff like that, and there's places I don't, and I don't know why my brain is like it is. Yeah. But like one example of that is like my apartment. Like we talked about the triggers earlier for me doing different things, and so like one of my main mechanisms for cleaning is just knowing somebody's going to come over, and then I like tidy it up because that's what my mom would want. But the like my apartment is frequently like kind of unorganized, and like my computer desk is utter chaos because there's just like stacks of Keyforge decks everywhere that I'm like waiting to play them a few times so that I can write notes about them and then file them back in their place. But like that doesn't really affect me. But then like you go to my phone and I have like, and like my computer and stuff, everything is super organized because it drives me nuts if it's not. But like,
whoa,
on my screen, there's no screen. This is my one home screen. I've got some folders with stuff. I've got the main things I would use here. And like when you go down to the apps, I've got like a few of my very most newest or most used apps here. And then like each of them is in their little folder, and like it's still one page. It's like, nope. I know it's going to be like 1, 2, 3 clicks and I'm in. Whoa. Is like,
that is an interesting thing that you just touched upon. You said newest or most used. And so that's cool because so my first impression of that is you got them. You don't know if they're your favorite yet, but you want to give them a fair chance.
Yeah. Because they're with a filing system like that, there are like, there's a couple games on my phone where it's like, I would probably play those more. But like once they're like banished into the games folder, it's like, well, by the time I'm committing to like looking at the games folder, then there might be something else that's catching my eye or whatever else. But it's like, when it's a new thing, I don't know. Sometimes too, I just don't know what the category of the utility is necessarily yet. Like, sometimes it's like I don't know whether this is a thing I'm going to use a lot. Sometimes it's like, well, is this like a functional app, or is it like an entertainment thing? Is it like going to end up in the food category? Like, I don't know. It just kind of depends on what the thing is.
Yeah. The category thing, that is one of like the biggest life hacks that I like, to the degree that I was stumbling through my life. That was one of the like easy pickings thing. Like, I don't know. I just gradually, I think for a long period of time, I didn't know what I was doing, but I was getting more organized, and my life, as I did that, my life got better. And then when I didn't do it, my life kind of didn't get any better.
Sure.
And it was just like, man, that makes such a difference. Just knowing like something as simple as the chopsticks go in the top drawer of the kitchen.
Yeah.
And
honestly, one of the biggest life changers for me like that is now inside my door. I have a thing where I can plug my keys in, and then my keys go there, and I don't lose them.
Oh.
As long as I like honor the routine of just get home, stick keys there, then I don't have to do that thing where it's time to go. Time to pat down every single pair of pants I've worn for the last week in hopes of finding my keys. And like, it turns out they're like under a grocery bag on the counter where I got lazy and like came in the door, threw them down, put the grocery bag on top, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, if you just like have a home for them and put them there.
These are door keys and keys of that nature, not like piano keys or computer keyboard keys.
I frequently don't carry those in my pockets, to be fair.
Well, yes. The second thing that's misleading about that is you say you plug your keys in.
That's fair. So
it sounds like you're electrifying them or you're doing something.
So the reason I say that is I have this dongle, which is a 1/4-inch jack like you would use for music, and I've got like a little, it looks like it's a miniature version of a Marshall head, and you plug your keys in there, and then like it's like a cool little decorative thing that's like, look at me, I think I'm a musician, and also it's functional. It's I put my parking pass on there, my wallet if I remember to put it on top of it, and my keys have an obvious spot for it, and then it's like they're there. It's great. That's
a pretty cool contraption. I have been, it took me a while for like my brain to load it up, the memory of it, but yeah, that's a pretty cool one.
Yeah, I got really excited about it.
It's kind of and it's like, it's satisfying because you can feel it click and then it's in there, but it's pretty smooth. There's something magical actually about the instrument kit, like the 1/4-inch jacks is like, they feel secure, but they're not greedy. I don't know.
I mean, I assume you've like taken guitars apart and played around with those some too, right? Like repaired it or had to resolder it or anything.
I have dabbled in that, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I don't know. It's very simple and functional, but it works and it's easy to maintain. It's cool. Mm-hmm. It's a very neat little thing.
So what else should we talk about? I had a few topics.
Sure.
We've kind of started touching on them. I think the organization thing, I told you about the podcast I was recently listening to with Yosha, and he, I don't know how to title him, and maybe that wouldn't do him justice anyway, but one of the topics he was discussing was, not just consciousness, but engineering consciousness, which is really cool. 'Cause I'm really into, like, I happened into consciousness studies, I guess. It's just like independent things. I just got really into it. I think like Buddhism had a lot of material out there that like leaked in through meditation practices and stuff into the United States. And so there's like a lot of accessible things, and that happened to fit with like my, the way that my mind likes to introspect. Is like a particular thing. I think, like for instance, maybe with Christianity, there's like this prayer thing that's more like a relationship to an other, and there's like a lot more of like a direct, like personal experience thing that trends with Buddhism and Zen and stuff like that. So that was like maybe my initiation to consciousness, and it's a topic that's out there. But I think he's getting into this more from the engineering perspective, where it's like, how would we create a consciousness? And perhaps like through the medium of an AI.
Sure.
I just found like that's doing is that's striking multiple regions of my brain, including the nerdy region, which is really exciting. Like I was just impressed at how, I think there's like, again, with the Buddhism thing, there's like maybe some antiquated language surrounding it. So it's like, and also it's like a mystery kind of thing, like an ethereal metaphysical kind of study thing. And you never know like how much of this is, like, is it a magical thing? I don't know. It's so, and I feel like there's layers of maybe even like the structure, you'll have like schools of, you'll have lineages, that's the word. And so that it's like the wisdom is kind of structured in a certain, maybe it's embedded in a certain ritual or a certain, like, maybe it takes 30 years to like generate the wisdom to be able to like be empowered with having the wisdom without being like destructive about it or something. So there could be good reason why there's like a lot of filtration happening up front with it. But I guess what I'm saying is just, especially without access to a teacher in that regard, it's like, I have no idea what's going on, and I could just be entirely like making stuff up in my imagination about it. But what Yosha was doing is actually like breaking down our everyday experience into, like, he was modeling it, like you would a program or,
Sure.
software. And it was so interesting. Do you have any experience in, let's see, have you ever considered this topic as far down as I've niched it?
I'm not gonna lie, I got a little lost on where we're going here. Like, are you asking, have I thought about consciousness in terms of AI? Are we talking about like what is consciousness, or where were you trying to branch to?
Yes, fair enough. I am still like organizing this in my own brain.
Sure.
So, I don't know where. I think this part is a little, we might go, not that we had a script, but just more like
Sure.
off-road kind of adventure
Sure.
thing. So if anything's resonating with you, we can start there and we'll see if I want to loop it back.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like I think there's some fun conversations around like, our AI is conscious, and like where is the line, and like where do you start feeling guilty about how you interact with them and stuff, because like, how do you feel about, so you've got an AI and it acts relatively human and stuff, and like how do you feel about like rebooting it or like wiping its memory, like how there's a bunch of moralistic stuff we can talk about with that, and I think there's also some interesting stuff to talk about with like free will versus determinism, and like if you believe in free will, then like where is the line of the machine having free will to do its own thinking versus us like pushing it towards certain, pushing it towards decisions or recommendations or whatever else. And if you're more of a believer in determinism, where like, given a set of inputs, you're going to respond the same way in every time. So like you aren't really making a decision. It's just how your body works and how your brain works. And so like, okay, so if humans are deterministic, like what separates us from AI in that way? So I don't know if any of that stuff you want to try and spitball more on, or
any of it. Yeah, there are so many branches that we could go, because that does like we could start at determinism, and I think that immediately implies a destination, right? Like a cart, like a trajectory. There's like, well, if there's a story and it's determined, then it leads to something, if at least a circle, I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like if nothing external to the system is happening, you can't change where it's going. Like if you think you're making a change to it, actually that's what you were going to do all along anyway. So then you're leading to the same output ultimately.
Should we like define consciousness first?
I'm happy.
Or try to do that?
Yeah, sure.
I think, okay, so for my understanding, we're conscious beings, and we have an experience, and it's not just that we have an experience, it's that we can take another perspective that that can view the experience. It's like awareness of the fact that we're aware. So like I know I'm having an experience, and so I can predict what will happen in the future and remember what happened in the past, and I can see how I'm relating to those things. And I think as to take the flip side of that, I think there have been times, maybe when you're scrolling through some social media, or you're immersed in a movie perhaps, where you lose track of everything, and then you've just kind of melded in with the experience, and it's like to a degree you've lost some consciousness. Like you're not completely outside of consciousness there, but that's more of like a metaphor. It's like if we were to put it on a gradient, you're like less conscious there because you're more absorbed in just sensory perceptions.
All right, so consciousness is separate from your perceptions and your experiences.
I would posit that it is.
In terms of, where is the line of conscious beings and stuff, like I think, most people are aligned that plants aren't conscious. Mushrooms we're not going to talk about, but they might be conscious. But like, where in the animal kingdom do we start counting things as conscious? Like, are fish conscious?
Oh,
Probably. And then like by the time you're up to like cats and dogs and stuff, like I would think yes. I don't know. Like where do you fall on that? Does that vibe with you, or is that like no, only humans are conscious?
I mean, it would. It's like one of those things that's kind of impossible to. Well, I don't know. Impossible is a strong word, but like how do you know kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've seen maps that are more like it's again like a gradient. Like maybe you have like a rock which has an amount of consciousness, and then there is a plant that is relatively more, and then maybe a dog, and I don't know.
But like it kind of depends on where you're defining, like whether or not they respond to external stimuli is like, okay, like a rock basically doesn't, like it'll shatter or melt or something if you do something extreme to it, but like it's not really doing anything on its own to react to the environment. It's more just subject to its environment. Whereas like plants, they face towards the sun or whatever, they bloom in the right season, and so they're like accepting more inputs and like doing actions on their own. And then like further down the way, it's like, a dog comes when you call it, and like so that's like even a stimulus that's like not a naturally, well, maybe arguably not a naturally occurring thing. It just like, it's like that next level up of abstraction of ideas, I guess.
I think I want to push back on a couple points here. First of all, like we exist on a particular time horizon and like frequency of modulation. Like, I mean, if you compare, I don't know if this is the best comparison, but you know how they say like dogs are seven of our days is one day for a dog, and kind of thing, or like Mercury goes around the sun however many times for every single revolution that the Earth makes, and so there's like different time frames, and so it could be that it's really hard for us to observe the consciousness of a tree might exist over a period of 200 years, or like a rock, it's maybe the way that it affects, I don't know, maybe its consciousness is just on a different time horizon. But then that kind of leads me to the second thing, which is I feel like I wouldn't be so quick to, because a rock doesn't like animate that much, I don't know that necessarily means that it's not conscious, because I think like a person could be paralyzed but like locked in syndrome, and so there's like this mind spirit kind of thing that can have that awareness, but not really be that animate.
I hear where you're coming from. I guess I remain unconvinced that rocks have consciousness especially in the way you had started to define it previously, where they are capable of understanding their and others' experiences. Like, I guess in general, a rock is like an amalgamation of molecules of one or many types, depending on if, is it just a salt crystal, or is it like a big old honking chunk of granite? Like, you got different things like that. But like, I guess, are you positing that there could be conscious life at like the atomic level? Or are you maybe pushing towards that resolution? Or are you saying vegetarians should feel guilty about eating salt because it's conscious? To minimize the argument.
I don't know. Well, yeah, I think I'm just trying to understand. I don't know. Definitely not jump to any conclusions. I don't know. I guess maybe let's readjust our frame. Like I think one of the entry points again, like as I heard Yosha saying, is I think one of the trajectories that conversation was going was that, to put it bluntly, maybe humans are here just to release a bunch of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere,
sure,
and then pass on the baton of consciousness to perhaps AI, and then we will have served our purpose, and then maybe AI, and then like it's, and I think he was saying something about like playing the longest. You can play games on different time horizons, not to be confused with the thing I was saying earlier, but like he said, cancer is playing a shorter game than your person is playing, than your physical being is playing. And he thinks that consciousness has a like wants to play the longest game possible while creating a bunch of interesting things like in the meantime. And I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I don't know. One thing I like to think about too, I just was recently reading this book, series of books by Adrian Tchaikovsky. It was like Children of Time, and Children of Memory, and then Children of Ruin, or maybe I've mixed up the order of them, but they were super interesting. It was like, here is Earth, bad things happen on Earth, people need to go. Where are they going to go? Well, they're going to go terraform some other planets, maybe uplift some Earth species to help them prepare the planet, and then humans can flee there. But then, ultimately the whole series is kind of not devolving, but like exploring what is life and consciousness and sort of stuff along those axes. And so the first one is like, let's talk about sentient animals. And like, there's this set of animals that have been uplifted, and they think and have their own history. And like, I mean, that's pretty easily definable as life. Great. And then like book 2, it's like, there's like a more, without trying to spoil too much, there's a separate consciousness that like isn't necessarily life as we know it. And it's like more parasitic, but at the same time, you like kind of explore like, is this reasonable to observe his life? And like, I think it ultimately concludes like, yeah, it's making its own decisions and thoughts and compiling stuff and whatever else. And then by the time you're at book 3, it's like, then, you know, you start getting more into AI and like, where is AI alive? And like, how do we interact with that as a society? And it's just like, you know, you kind of get into that like matrixy type thing of like, are we living in a simulation? Is whatever, like, if a computer is like making all the testing a bunch of things, like, how does that all work? And I don't know. Good books. Definitely, if you're looking for some sci-fi to read the first one, see if you like it.
You know, I never got into sci-fi. Well, it's that I never tried.
Sure.
So that's interesting altogether.
Yeah, I do like, especially the first book is really good. So I would, if you're looking for a book to read, highly recommend that.
Huh.
And then if you enjoy the writing style and want to hear more from him, then consider the other books. But you would also be fine just stopping at the one and have read an interesting tale told in an interesting way and like get some stuff to think about. But yeah, I don't know. I think when I start thinking about like, are we living in a simulation? Like,
what kind of simulation?
Obviously, my gut instinct is no. Like, I feel alive, but like that's what a person that was told to think they were alive in a simulation would say. So, but I don't know. My existence being what it is, I feel like I have free will. I don't think I'm in a simulation. I think that's maybe a cop out for people that feel like they don't have agency in changing their current situation or whatever. And like, it is hard to change your situation in life.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's some higher force limiting you so much as like a collective force that maybe isn't uplifting society as much as we should be as humans.
Yeah, there's the whole mystery about consciousness kind of stuff that's interesting. I like to get down to the nitty gritty thing.
Sure.
Like it's really cool to listen to like descriptions on how to model it. For instance, like I think one of the early, so in meditation, one of the early things that you learn to do is to pay attention to, well, a lot of times you like take an object and try to focus on that object, and it's like just visualize a triangle, and then what that does is inevitably like you realize that you keep drifting off, and it can be like 5 minutes before you remember the fact that you were supposed to be thinking about a triangle. And so it's like it's showing you how much you're on autopilot, but it's also exposing you to objectifying your thoughts, because I think a lot of times I think it's a shared experience that we're often identified with our thoughts or identified with our emotions. Like if I'm having an emotion, I am that, and so that means that whatever's happening in the current story is also that, and so it's like if I'm angry, then the world needs to change because how do I become unangry? It's like I'm in relation with the world, and the world must be making me angry. But then once you start to like objectify these emotions and take them away from you and look at them and go, oh, that's an emotion right now. It's really hard to be convinced that you can do that. And then it's like I don't have to be that emotion. It can just be a feeling, or it can just be a thought. And like maybe sometimes I would have paranoid thoughts, and then I would start to see the world through the lens of this paranoid thing. And then it's like it just keeps ramping up that emotion.
Sure.
Because if you're walking around paranoid, the world starts to become a justification for you being paranoid. Because I mean, do you want to hang out with a paranoid person all the time? You
Probably not.
Probably not. And so then your relationships start to disintegrate.
But that's also, and like that's because like paranoia is like kind of an uncomfortable feeling, right? And so when that's like becoming a shared experience, that's, you know, arguably a negative feeling, and then that's probably why people would agree that like maybe you don't want to hang out with a paranoid person.
Yeah.
Spitballing.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, there's this social contagion thing with any like even positive emotions too and stuff. And I think that people do have a probably a solid intuition to at least be skeptical, if not like uncomfortable with like I think paranoia serves a function.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's like instinctive, right?
Yeah.
It's like a self-preservation instinct.
And but it can become, I think one of the things that I used to walk around thinking like, well, people have told me that I'm intelligent. And the way that I understand intelligence, like how I might define intelligence, is the speed at which you can recognize patterns.
Sure.
And so I would take that, because that's the narrative that was foreign, because people were giving that to me, and I was like, okay, checks it out. I seem to finish my work faster than people and stuff like that in my class. And then so I would take that, and then like as people are telling me, your name is Michael, you're intelligent, you're an artist, and all these things, I would take that and I would build this little identity. And then after a certain point, you start running into obstacles, because the life stops handing things to you for just being alive. And then it's like, what's going on? So there's this error detection thing going on. And then so I started thinking like intelligence was a curse. But then what I came to understand is intelligence is, by that definition, was like speed of pattern recognition. So it's like, it's a lever, and then you have to point it at something productive.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think one thing just I've learned constantly as I've experienced more is like there's just so many different kinds of intelligence, and like pattern matching is absolutely one kind of intelligence, but like you know, there's other more functional kinds of intelligence, and then there's like social and emotional intelligence, and like those are also absolutely intelligences, but it's not the same as like being told you're good at second grade, you want to go faster.
That was the high point of my life, Cody. I was good at second grade.
Me too, buddy. I remember when that meant something.
Second grade's actually when I stopped turning in my homework, because second grade's when I became a perfectionist.
Oh yeah?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I remember like going home and you get your history book, and then so it's like questions that you have to answer, and then it's a scanning operation. All right, what part of this book has this?
Yeah.
It was interesting. The early questions, like second grade questions, they'll be like, they'll take the sentence from the book and just erase a word.
Yeah.
It's always,
what year did the Pilgrims land in? 1612.
But yeah, it was one of those things. Have you ever had that when like, I would get to the point where it's like there would be 10 questions and one of them I couldn't find an answer for. So I was like, I can't turn this in. Have you ever? Like,
interesting.
I guess I didn't necessarily know that meant that I took a 0 for the assignment. I don't know. It's just peculiarity.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've always been like hyper competitive about stuff. Like I've learned how to not be an overbearing asshole when I'm doing competitive things, but like I think there was a lot of me that like in school was like, I want to do well at this because I want to be the best. Like I want to, you know, I have this image of myself that I am intelligent, and so to maintain that, I must do well on these assignments. But like, it was interesting the way the pattern kind of like changed as I got older, where it was like it was never a perfectionist thing for me, at least I don't think. But I do struggle with that in aspects of my life, and we can circle back to that if you want. But like the paradigm kind of shifted in college, where it went from like it wasn't about like getting the best grades anymore. Like in my friend group, it felt like it kind of became about like who could do the best with the least amount of work, which is like efficient intelligence.
Efficient.
And so there was definitely like, okay, well, can we only study for one night for this exam and still get an A or whatever, a B, or, is a B good enough? Yeah, probably. I mean, nobody cares about my degree at this point in my life anyway, I don't think. Mm-hmm. But like, yeah, could I do well enough without having to spend my whole college life studying in a library? Like that was kind of where that went. And then like, as I started working too, at first it was like, well, I need to be the greatest software developer anybody has ever seen in their entire life. And then it was like I started working with people, and it was like, wait, like it's important to have like your own passions in life, and like, yeah, you want to do good work, but also like you need to have a life outside of that. And so like then it becomes like, how can I do well enough with my job that I continue to have, I'm making money and like having a comfortable way of living, but also that it's not like interfering with my ability to live a happy life. And if you're like sacrificing years of your life for some corporation that doesn't even know who you are, like, and that's also at the same time limiting your ability to do the things you actually want to do, like maybe you need to change something. And I don't know, like it's no longer that I feel like I need to be the very best software developer ever. Like I still would like to be a good software developer and like eventually become a manager or whatever else. Like we're not talking about life stuff, but it's just like I have retargeted my goals and like what I think it means to be quote intelligent in the context of the conversation we were having.
Have you ever, so I'm going to build up towards, with the consciousness thing, I like to get to a practical level of it.
Sure.
And it's using the awareness to focus on, it's taking your whole, whatever it is you're doing as object. So then you can start to now maneuver your life consciously. Sure. And so I've had periods of my life where I've reinvented myself, but they were beautiful, melancholy, passionate, emo, poetic periods where the transformation thrust itself into my experience, and I was along for the ride. And it was just like, new relationships, new job, new schooling, whatever it is, everything just changed. And it does like, it kind of suggests evidence towards that deterministic thing. Like maybe it makes it believable to me, like maybe we have some free will to wander, to stray a little bit away from the line of determinism, but ultimately like your soul has its way no matter what. And so to the degree that you wander further away, you get pulled back really, really hard. There's like a correction kind of thing. That's just suggesting that up as a possibility.
Sure.
But that's, those transformations were markedly different than the kinds of things that are going on nowadays. So have you had, first of all, does that resonate with you? Do you know what I mean with like those early types of?
Yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying, but I don't know if I have ever like, I don't feel like I've ever had like a radical personal transformation in my life. Like, I mean, puberty hit me like a ton of bricks, but like aside from that, like, I don't know, like I still, I feel like as a goal in my life, I have been constantly trying to improve myself for the better and for the betterment of people around me. But I can't like, I feel like I'm having trouble pointing at like, oh, here's a singular experience that made me change my entire worldview because this, that, or the other thing like needed to change or whatever. Oh. But like, a transformation that I have made conscious effort on in a somewhat recent time frame was just like, I don't know. I always, I want people to like me. I want to be like fun to be around, but how a lot of that manifested was like sort of an upbringing thing too, where it was like, if you like, like hanging out with somebody, you give them you rib them a little bit, you like mess with them, but like not knowing when or where to stop that sometimes was a problem for me. And so like I would be a mean person, and I realized like I would, after doing some soul searching, I was like, like you said, like objectifying it, thinking about the interactions and like, who am I versus who do I want to be? And like definitely trying to make an effort to be more inclusive and less negative and more like, if there is like making fun of going on, like as much as possible, point it back at myself rather than like telling somebody they're stupid or whatever for like making a silly grammar mistake or something. Like, I don't know. It was just, but it's like, trying to be a more generally positive and choosing humor that's like funny for the sake of being funny rather than because it's everybody points at somebody and laughs at them. Right. And it's, I'd like to think that I've been relatively successful at that, but
so if this makes things boring for you, then don't use it. But
sure.
But my next question is, because you're saying, so this is a thing that you've been doing more consciously.
Yeah.
So is there like, to what degree do you have a process or a mechanism to not just be aware that you want to make a change, but to actually take the football and run?
Yeah. I don't really know how to I don't have like a good mechanism or some, flywheel operation for saying like, this is how I would implement that in my life. But it's just more of a like trying to be more thinking about the moments that I'm experiencing and like thinking about how I impact myself and people around me. And then how do I like, are there things that I'm doing that I would like to change? Like, I don't know, like in a similar vein, like definitely like in high school and college, like early college especially, I was like, shock humor I thought was great. Like if you just said something really outlandish, people got uncomfortable, but they also laughed because like you didn't know what else to do with it. And you knew I was trying because I'm smiling and giggling. And so sometimes that's just funny. And it's like, yeah, but like then choosing how to pick your punches of like, wait, I should say something actually clever rather than just like so offensive that all you can do is like, what is wrong with this?
Yeah. Like, that's interesting because that kind of shot, what's kind of explosive about that kind of thing is that there's something aggressive about it.
Yeah.
And something that another person wouldn't want to challenge because if you're out there saying something so outlandish that it's like, I don't know what you're capable of right now. And then there's like, yeah, there's this reflexive, like submissive, like he kind of laughter. And then, but I don't know like what inspires you or someone to do something like that. But maybe it is laughter because maybe we just want some humor kind of thing. But at the end of the day, I think that exchange boils down to you're in control of whatever activity's going on after the point in time that you do that.
I very much agree. And I think that's...
I just got chills.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely like there's definitely a control thing to it. And I think it's like, wanting to feel like but you both want people to be present and like respect you and everyone else, but like also to feel like you're making an impact on the situation sometimes because it seems like that's going to make you memorable and whatever else. But like sometimes it's also just like, it's a lot. I don't know where I was going with that, but I do think there's like I do agree that there's definitely a part of me that's like, yeah, it is satisfying to like have an impact on other people or like make them react in a way, and hopefully it's a positive way.
To be to be in relation to another, you know, it's like you talked about people being on their phones in their own mirror of their musical resonance.
Sure.
And I don't know. So there's, and also, you know, we experiment with everything. Like when a baby starts off making noises, like they make all of these different, they make all of the phonetics that you can make, and it turns out we only use a subset of them in like the English language.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get rewarded for, anyway, there's, I mean, that's just a part of what we do as human beings. So yeah. It is, you know, it's one of those things where like, hopefully that there seems to be, is there like a lot of luck involved where, you know, just like there's a lot of luck involved that you don't run out and get eaten by a coyote when you go hiking or something. And similarly, like that you don't cross an uncrossable boundary socially, kind of thing.
Sure.
Throughout that process. Yeah. So what's interesting, so let's see, you said that you didn't necessarily have a process or a mechanism for this conscious improvement thing, but when you reflected on it, you noticed that some things that you could grab are that you would like try to remember to do this type of thing or that type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I would just maybe term it like objective self-reflection, like try and be an unbiased observer of your own actions and impacts, and like, you know, be honest with yourself about how it's impacting. But like, and there's two avenues that you get the feedback for that. The one is directly from yourself, and that's sort of that loop you're talking about where you are like, you're on your own, you're like in the shower thinking about how things are going or whatever. But like the other way you need to remember to take the feedback too is like when you are in the situations that are generating the feedback that involve others, and like whether or not you're actively pointing at the time too, but just like go think through those experiences and like, was I who I wanted to be there, is sort of a, that's like you do the practice and then you take the test and you see if like you're still pointed in the right direction, I guess.
It's like an Udo cycle. Is that what they call it? The Orient.
Oh.
But yeah, so there's a feedback regimen of some sort.
Sure. Yeah.
This is where it gets exciting, because I think we go from theory to implementation, is because earlier, like I said meditation, we start out as beginner. You don't have to go through the meditative particular path or whatever, but we use that as an example. We start off, maybe I'm visualizing a triangle and I'm practicing, and then I get distracted and then I come back, and it's like training a puppy, and then they sit down, stay, and then they walk away, and then you're not like forced, like constrictively, like stay put, because that kind of is its own kind of tension, introduces energy that might push you. I don't know. It's a disturbance. But yeah, you're just, it's like you have to have self-love through this process.
Absolutely.
Where it's just like, here, you would take this, I imagine a little golden retriever puppy. You take this cute little puppy and you go, no, sit back to the spot, and then you boop, and then, you know, sit, stay, and then they stay, and then that kind of thing. And so it's pretty abstract. And then you do that as, maybe you might have a meditation schedule or whatever. And it's like, I'm picturing a triangle, or I'm looking at a candle flame, or whatever it is. But then when you take that and you go, like, be a better human being to the people in my life, and now you have a new object or for inquiry, and
Sure.
then your life has this little inquiry that floats around with you, and so you kind of have programmed this schedule in to do a state check. So like every once in a while, and who know, there's different ways to trigger that state check. And so you could have like every morning I reflect on what I want to do with the day, and every evening I reflect on what I have done with the day. But there's also like event-based triggers where maybe every time you get angry, or every time you want to make a raunchy joke or something, the raunchy joke inclinate, like you get familiar with that feeling, like it's bubbling up inside of you.
Yeah.
And then that's your trigger to remember, I have an inquiry. And then there's like, whatever you do with, I don't know, you have to have some process, maybe like a defusing process or something to calm you down, or to gracefully transition without making that joke perhaps, or assess, do I actually want to make this joke right now?
Sure.
Kind of thing. And that is I think that's so interesting and powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot in line with a bunch of habit building type stuff, right? You like try and incorporate repetition and reward and reflection and some whatever blend works best for you. But I think for me, the hardest one to remember to do is just that reflection of like, I think I'm very susceptible to external stimuli of pretty much all types. And so it's super easy for me to like wake up in the morning, grab my phone, like do the Wordle, do all that stuff, like get going, go get food, go like watch some things, like work on a thing, do my exercise, whatever, and then like hang out with people, and then you're like exhausted and it's time for bed and you go to bed. And like
autopilot?
It's not even an autopilot thing, but it's just like, it's very easy. Like, so you have that packed day, and every time there's like about to be an instant of downtime, it's really easy to just like pull out your phone or your book or your game or whatever, and just like immediately plug into that form of entertainment. And I think it is, at least for me, it's important to like remember to take time to just let myself hear my own thoughts, which like maybe sounds obvious. Maybe it's just me that struggles with that. But like, it is handy for me to like, if I go to a restaurant by myself, like sometimes that's a good avenue to just like, I'm not going to take out my phone the entire time I'm here. I'm going to like look at the menu and then wait for my food and just think. And like having that time to kind of sit in your own head is super helpful if you like, because otherwise you just sit there and you're like, okay, I'm going to pull out this thing, and I keep myself entertained the whole time. And like, sure, it was like fun, but you don't give yourself that period to like reflect and grow.
I think that's related to the concept of ego death and from what I understand, the ego doesn't want to die. It has an infinite bag of tricks, and one of them is to I mean, like we don't have to wake up, and we don't have to like get as some of these people have termed it, like take like learn our own source code and take charge to rewrite the program. But let's say you're inspired to try that out. The ego is your new, like Sephiroth, or I don't know.
Sure.
Adversary.
Yeah.
In case people don't know who Sephiroth is.
That's the makeup company, right? I'm kidding. What is that, Sephira? No.
Sephora.
Yeah.
Anyway. Do you prefer Sephora, or would you rather go to Ulta?
I don't know.
People have opinions on this.
I don't know what the second is. I don't know. I don't personally really wear any makeup. I have experimented with guy liner. I might try it more. But yeah.
Dark or light?
Dark.
Definitely dark.
Definitely dark. Dark towards your soul. Yeah. No, but just like, I don't know. It's more just my personal taste of like I get hung up a little bit on like wanting to be true to myself and my own identity and everything else. And I think it seems odd to me when people are like, you know, going super hard on makeup or dyeing their hair and everything else. And like even tattoos to an extent, like there's part of the reason I don't have any tattoos is I just can't ever decide on something I would want to have on my body for the rest of my life because I'm indecisive sometimes. Yeah. But it's also like, that's not necessarily gonna, like, I guess if I was good at doing tattoos and I like did it to myself, like that would be a form of my own expression of whatever. But like if I go to somebody and I'm like, I need you to make art on my arm, like now I'm like expressing somebody else's talent and everything else on me, but it's not a me thing in my head. I don't know, it's like,
yep. There's degrees of that because some people do design their own tattoo and then other. But yeah, that is interesting. I've never really thought too hard, other than the artwork itself. I've never thought too hard about like the fact that there's like an energy transference of some like this. The image was in someone's. I don't know. It's been articulated through the body of another person.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. I just got my hair cut yesterday. It happened then.
Yeah. No, but like, I don't know. Like,
I mean, even this will grow out. Not.
You'll make it there eventually if you let it. But like, yeah, I don't know. And like, that's a similar reason why I don't dye my hair, or like why I don't really like to put stuff in my hair. Cause it's like, it feels it gives me this feeling of forcing something not me onto me.
Right.
And I don't like that feeling.
So it sounds like you're your personality is pretty integrated. Would you?
My personality is integrated with itself, with my body, with the
totality of your being. So for instance, so one of the things when you said the first time I thought this struck me, but I didn't stop the conversation there, was I said that I would have these bursting transformations that bubbled up and just changed me to a different person. And so I think that part of the reason for that could have been that one of my coping mechanisms with life was to disassociate and was to go up into my imagination, go and retreat into a tree house if one was available, go and just not be in my body, be in my mind, and go and be in a particular compartment of my mind. And it was kind of like daydreaming and kind of thing. But what that meant is that sometimes whatever I was doing in my day-to-day existence was chugging along, and then that it was like I'd kind of split my personality into different things. And we do that for practical reasons. There's like extreme ones where you'll have like where people start calling it a disorder. But I think there's a pretty cool, I saw a pretty cool exercise that this guy was doing with a group of people where he would have them, you would kind of like, he would say, I want to talk to the protector. And so you had to stand up and then turn around and then sit down. And when you sat down, you were the protector. And then he would ask questions, and then they would answer as the protector. And then it's like, what are you doing? You know, like, why don't you let me, blah, blah, blah. And then he would change to like, all right, now I want to talk to the victim. And then like the victim carried the story of all of the tragedies of the person's life kind of thing. But then there's the wounded person. And so you'd stand up and turn around, and then now I'm the wounded. But the wounded thing isn't, the wounded person isn't really suffering, because the victim is the one that carries the story of all of that crap. Right. And the wounded person just like, you know, I can't use my arm so much anymore. And then ultimately, like, there's this, I don't know, we went, I'll just give one more. There was like the innocent child. And so there's like this innocent child within all of it. And so you kind of like start to produce these personas and layer them onto each other. And then and then like maybe we're trying to protect that innocent child within us, and then we have the protector, and then he creates a barrier, and then there's all these different things going on, and then I guess just to bring it all full circle, there's, you know, eventually he'll say like, all right, I want to speak to big mind, and big mind, well, there's like the controller, and there's like big mind, and I don't know, there's all these different things. And where was I? Okay, so yeah, this was like about splitting personalities. And so I think that you know, people will have a work persona, or people have like a TV persona, and people will have like a it's Friday night persona kind
Absolutely.
of thing.
Yeah.
So you know, so these are I think, yeah, I've just given like a bunch of different examples of like pieces of our personality, or maybe even whole, fully built out personas or costumes or things that we wear. And sometimes we'll have a set of them that we have an aversion to, and we're like, I am not that kind of person. And then I think you start having, there's this thing where you'll kind of, if you're not integrated, if you've pushed that out, so that aversion means that like you won't accept identifying with that piece of yourself, and then so sometimes you'll have like a struggle dealing with that, because basically reality is reality no matter what, and that piece of you is there no matter what, and you can't properly model the world, so your predictive factor it constantly fails because you've dissociated that. And so I guess I'm saying you sound like a pretty integrated person, at least from one point of observation.
Sure. And I do, you know, now that hearing that whole explanation stuff, I do think that's like a conscious decision, and that's, you know, from like elementary and high school, you know, trying so desperately to fit in and like be liked and everything else. And it was like, there's this subset of people, and like, you know, you do naturally change your personality a little bit depending on who you're around and what things you have in common with them. But I think, you know, I was willing to a fault to just like try and be whoever I needed to be to fit in with the people I wanted to fit in with or whatever. And I think part of maturing has just been recognizing that like, no, it's more important that I'm me and actually me, because I'll be happy if I am doing things and being around people that like I act well with, and like I act like who I want to be around with. And like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, you know, smaller examples are like, oh, did you see that movie? And like, I had read about the movie, but I hadn't seen it, but I'd be like, and like, you just kind of act like you've seen it so that you fit in and stuff. And like, that's really stupid. Like, nobody's going to like think less of you because you didn't see it. But like, as a younger person, that's hard.
People ask me all the time, and especially if it's the same person every time.
I know.
And it's like, I haven't seen anything you ever watch.
Yeah. Yep.
I promise you I'm a cool and interesting person still.
Yeah. Like, I don't share that experience with you, but I'm sure we can find things we have in common, like in that. Yeah.
But yeah, that is okay. Yeah, that's stupid.
Yeah. And so, you know, and that was like, I've had that problem in relationships where it's like, you try and like, you know, we have talked in the past about like codependence and like how, you know, there's parts of that are really nice, but also like you kind of lose your own identity in said experience. And that's like difficult and frustrating and like hard to reconcile with. And so I think that's something I have, you know, it's a goal I am reaching towards, but just like being more true to myself and finding places that the me I am / wanna be fits in well with, rather than trying to like compress myself or like hide some part of me to like fit in with something that it's just kind of like.
Sometimes I hear that about like living and, you know, taking truth as a virtue and living your life truthfully or something. And then I've heard that be coupled with, and then that means well, what does that mean? That means that you have to deal with the consequences no matter what, kind of thing. And that sounds kind of like off-putting, actually. That's not, like, that's part of it.
Well, the word consequences is scary.
Consequences. Wait, have you, Sabrina the Teenage Witch? Did you ever watch that show?
I haven't.
There was well, let me explain it to you.
Is this going to be the mansplaining I've heard so much about? Okay.
This is silly. There was some dude, and he shows up and he says the consequences will be dire. I don't know. I like Sabrina the Teenage Witch. What a tangent. Let's go back.
I'm not gonna lie, this whole conversation I was picturing Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I also haven't seen.
Oh yeah, that's Sarah Michelle Gellar, but they are.
Yeah, no, I've made it back to Sabrina now though. Mm-hmm. So.
Melissa Joan Hart. Middle names were in back in the day. Three named
people,
blonde women were like, that's the definition of the 90s, in my opinion.
Yeah, Mary Kate and Ashley.
Whoa. Oh, yeah, sharp. Consequences, truth, living as yourself. And yeah, consequences is a scary word, but there's also like there's so much, like, how about being comfortable in your own skin?
That's difficult.
That's a great I think that's a great side effect of, like, I guess you still have to, like, be maybe it's not a guaranteed output of living according to who you are. But I think you kind of have to do them both to get that.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to, I was in a relationship at one point where I was, wearing the clothes that I was supposed to wear and listening to the type of music that was supposed to be cool, and dyeing my hair and stuff. And it was like, it robbed me of my self-worth. It was, and then what else did it do? It meant that the people who would be attracted to that person were not the people that I wanted hanging around me. So let your freak flag fly. Yeah. Is the moral of the story.
Absolutely.
And scream it from the mountaintops.
Yeah. And, like, comfortable in your own skin is, like, a complicated word, or, like, turn of phrase, because I'm like, it's, as much as I've spent a bunch of time learning about myself, it's like, yeah, I know I get socially anxious, especially around people I don't know, or that I feel like I need to impress for whatever reason, whether it's just self, being competitive with myself or whatever else. But, like, it does change a lot of your outlook when you have a more accurate representation internally of, like, who you are, or why you're wired like you are, or just, what are things you can do to kind of shortcut that. And, like, I think one thing I learned during the pandemic in terms of transformational stuff was I just had spent a lot of my time thinking I was an introvert, because, like, you do the test and you, like, there is a party. Do you want to go to the party? Yes or no? No, because, like, no, there's going to be a bunch of people there. That sounds scary.
Did you get this test out of a cereal box?
Yes, tricks are for kids. No, but, like,
but yeah,
but it turns out I really like, but, like, I've known my whole life, like, I do like having, like, really close friends that I can talk about anything with and stuff. And, like, that is something that's important to me. So then when I was in the pandemic and I was spending all of my life, like, talking to people awkwardly through a computer screen, like, I was missing out on some things that really made me tick. And, like, it turns out, like, no, I'm an extrovert. I like being able to share thoughts and experiences with other people. I just get nervous around new people, or, like, when I don't feel like I know how or where I fit in or whatever. And so that, like, just adjusting that perception of myself to know that, like, no, I need to interact with people. I need to be able to, like, look people in the eyes from time to time and have a conversation with them about whatever, that's like something that actually is really important to my mental health. And then, yeah, it's just understanding that, like, yeah, I'm socially anxious about some stuff, but like introvert isn't like that. That was a way of like getting away from some of the discomfort of what I perceived was like how I was wired, but it wasn't actually right. It was like, no, it's like I'm an extrovert that just is a little weird.
So the introvert thing was like a narrative that you adopted to like as an why am I going to try a hard word?
Right up the
analgesic, just like a surface treatment, just like to soothe, but not, it's not like a treatment. It's
it was like an observation of myself. Like, yes, I get uncomfortable in these situations with a lot of people. Like, and I like reading books. Like, I'm probably an introvert because that's like what introverts like to do. But it's like, no, like, yeah, sometimes after I like do a bunch of things a day, sometimes it is nice to have a little time by myself to decompress. But like, I think more important to me is like the ability to share thoughts and ideas with other people directly. Like, that's what actually makes my brain fire in happy ways, and the introvert stuff is like kind of a side effect of needing to cool down from time to time or whatever.
Well, I actually have a copy of the introvert test from that bag of tricks.
Oh yeah,
and we'll see right now. Are you an introvert? So you've already answered. You like reading books.
Yeah.
And what was the other one? You don't like to go to that party.
Yeah.
Now, this is the final question. Do you like cats?
I do.
You're an introvert, Cody.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been a great podcast and a great conversation. I think this is a good time to call it. Is there anywhere in particular, like you were setting up your solo album project, is there anywhere in particular that you want to point people to at this point, or maybe I can just circle back and leave a link once you have it?
Yeah, sure. So online, pretty much everywhere you'll find me as Cody Kraz, CodyKraz. So that's, Discord, Reddit, all the places. And then for music stuff, I think I'm setting up a Bandcamp page now. It's not up yet, but I'm just gonna the solo stuff is gonna be published under the name Cody Krasny, CodyKrasny, not a Z. That was a stylistic choice I made in college. But anyway, so CodyKrasny.bandcamp.com will be where you can find music.
All right.
Soonish.
Your name is a little bit different than your handle, and yeah, cool. We had who is the, you mentioned a band earlier. I think we were kind of starting off and there was a lot of energy. So I don't know if like we could say it again a little slower. Was that who you rent the space with? Did they have?
Oh, yeah. My friend Thomas is in Calm Down Party.
Calm Down Party.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And they play around Seattle?
Yep. Yeah. Most recently, I saw him at Madame Lou's, which is the sidebar of the Crocodile. It was like I was just talking to him, and how they got the gig was there was this band from South Korea they liked, and they reached out to the band and were like, "Hey, can we open for you?" And they said yes, and that was how they got that gig. And I thought that was so cool.
Smart.
It was like, that's all it takes.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Thanks for joining.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. Thank you.
Take care. Bye. Bye.
Don't forget to click like and subscribe.
Oh, yeah.